In the early 1970s, a botanist named John Sorensen began compiling what would become one of the most systematically ignored bodies of evidence in the history of anthropology. Over 15 years, he documented dozens of plant species that appeared on both sides of the Pacific Ocean thousands of years before any known contact between civilizations. His conclusions were careful, methodical, and backed by data. The academic mainstream did not engage with them. Journals redirected. Funding committees passed. He eventually co-published his findings independently. And the question he spent his life asking is still sitting there, unanswered, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, waiting for someone to finally take it seriously. That someone is not going to be the institutions that ignored it, so let's talk about it here. Thousands of years before Columbus, before any European even imagined there was an ocean to cross, someone crossed it. Not by accident, not once, repeatedly. The evidence has been sitting in plain sight for decades, documented by serious scientists, confirmed by genetic laboratories, written up in peer-reviewed journals. And then quietly, systematically ignored by the academic mainstream. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is institutional inertia dressed up as scientific consensus. Let's start with something that seems simple, a vegetable, the sweet potato. It's everywhere in American cooking. It's everywhere in Polynesian cooking too. The sweet potato is native to South America. Its genetic origin point is the western coast of Peru and Ecuador. But when European explorers arrived in Polynesia in the 1500s, they found sweet potatoes already growing there, already cultivated, already deeply embedded in the local food culture. Already carrying local Polynesian names, linguistically derived from the Quechua word used in the Andes. Not a similar word, a derived word, a word that traveled with the plant because people carried it. The sweet potato does not survive prolonged saltwater exposure. It cannot drift across the Pacific and germinate. Oceanographers have tested this. The plant got there because people brought it, and that means people crossed the Pacific Ocean long before we were taught that was possible. A mainstream historian will tell you it's an anomaly, a curiosity, maybe a coincidence of linguistic evolution. That explanation has been tested and rejected by botanists and linguists working independently. And it's not just the sweet potato. That's where this stops being an anomaly and starts being a pattern. The bottle gourd appears in pre-Columbian South American archaeological sites dating back thousands of years before any documented contact with the Old World. The coconut genetic analysis shows Pacific coconut populations carry South American genetic signatures best explained by human-mediated transport. And then there's cotton, specifically the cultivated species Gossypium barbadense. It's a tetraploid. Its genome contains chromosomes from two ancestral species, one of Asian origin and one of American origin. It exists as a cultivated crop in both South America and across the Pacific in pre-Columbian times. A crop with that genetic profile does not develop simultaneously on opposite sides of an ocean without human involvement. Sorensen and his colleague Carl Johannessen documented a large number of plant species showing this kind of cross-Pacific profile, and the academic mainstream decided the correct response was silence. In 2020, a team of geneticists published a study in the journal Nature. Not a fringe publication, not a self-published paper by an ignored outsider. Nature, one of the most prestigious scientific journals on the planet. The study analyzed ancient DNA from pre-Columbian skeletal remains found on the eastern islands of Polynesia. The genetic signatures of native South Americans were present in Polynesian populations dating back to approximately 1150 to 1000 AD. Not as contamination, not as a statistical artifact, as a real, measurable, historically significant admixture event. meaning Polynesians and South Americans met, interbred, and went their separate ways, carrying each other's DNA across the ocean. When the study came out, the mainstream media covered it for about 48 hours and then moved on. No curriculum changes, no history textbook revisions, no official acknowledgement, just silence. The kind of silence that tells you something. If you accept the genetic evidence and the methodology has held up to scrutiny, you have to ask the next question. How did it happen? And when you ask how, you start unraveling a version of history that entire academic careers and entire university departments have been built on top of. That is where the resistance comes from, not from the data, from the consequences of the data. The navigator Thor Heyerdahl understood this in 1947. He built a balsa wood raft called the Kon-Tiki and sailed it from Peru to Polynesia in 101 days. The documentary film won an Academy Award in 1952. The world celebrated him, and the academic establishment spent the next 50 years treating his work as an adventurous stunt rather than a serious scientific hypothesis. Because Heyerdahl was not a professional anthropologist, he was an outsider. What they could not suppress was the ocean. What they could not suppress was the DNA. What they could not suppress was the plants. But they didn't have to suppress it, they just had to not fund it, not cite it, not include it in the curriculum. Doing nothing is the most powerful tool an institution has. In the 1990s and 2000s, several independent research groups applied for funding to conduct systematic genetic and archaeological surveys of the pre-Columbian Pacific. Most were redirected toward narrower questions that would not force confrontation with the larger narrative. You learn very quickly which questions you are allowed to ask, and you ask those, because those are the ones that get funded. And the ones that don't get asked don't get answered. And after a generation, they stop feeling like questions. They just feel like things that aren't true. This is not a shadowy cabal of villains deciding to hide history. It is something more mundane and more pervasive. It is a system of incentives that punishes curiosity in certain directions and rewards it in others. Grant committees made up of established academics who built their reputations on existing frameworks. Peer review processes where the reviewers are chosen from the same pool of people who benefit from the status quo. Tenure systems that reward citation counts, and you only get cited if you're working within the conversation that already exists. And at the bottom of all of it, students. Millions of students who sit in classrooms every year and are told that Columbus discovered America in 1492. That the Pacific was an uncrossable barrier until the European age of exploration. They are told these things not because they are true, because changing them is inconvenient for a system that does not know how to say it was wrong. Easter Island, you know the statues. Everyone knows the statues. What most people don't know is what was found in the soil samples taken near the statues. Pollen from the totora reed, a plant native to the highland lakes of the Andes, most famously Lake Titicaca in Peru and Bolivia. The reed was present on Easter Island before European contact, used in construction and boat building in ways that parallel its use in the Andes. The researchers who documented it, noted it, filed it, and the broader implications were not pursued, because pursuing them would mean asking how an Andean plant got to Easter Island, and that question has only one reasonable answer. There is a site in Chile called El Arenal. Archaeologists working there found chicken bones, pre-Columbian chicken bones. A 2007 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences reported that these bones carried genetic signatures related to Polynesian chicken populations. A follow-up study in 2008 challenged the dating methodology and raised questions about possible contamination. The debate has not been fully resolved. What is not disputed is that the question exists, that it is serious, and that it has not received the research attention a finding of this significance would normally generate. That gap between the significance of a question and the resources allocated to answering it is itself a kind of answer. Indigenous peoples on both sides of the Pacific have old stories describing ocean voyages, people from across the Great Water, exchanges of plants and knowledge. For most of the 20th century, academic anthropology treated these stories as myth, as metaphor. That framing carries assumptions about the reliability of oral history that the discipline has been formally reckoning with for 30 years. When oral traditions from coastal South American groups describing contact with people from the West are mapped against the genetic and botanical evidence, they stop functioning as myth, they start functioning as corroboration. The Polynesian navigators who made contact with South American populations around 1150 to 1200 AD were not lost. They were not lucky. Polynesian navigators were the most accomplished open ocean sailors in human history. They were navigating by stars, ocean swells, bird migration patterns, and atmospheric conditions across thousands of miles of open water, centuries before European sailors dared leave sight of the coastline. The Polynesian expansion across the Pacific is the largest maritime migration in human history. It covered more ocean than any other culture's seafaring tradition. These were not people who stumbled across South America. These were people who went looking and found it, and the sweet potato came back with them. 1200 AD contact is now genetically confirmed. The botanical evidence reaches much further, and we do not know the full shape of what happened. Because the questions that would tell us are the questions that don't get funded. The evidence sits in storage, in unanalyzed samples, waiting for the institutional will to ask. Not because the technology doesn't exist, because the will to know is weaker than the will to not disrupt. When you teach people that the Pacific was uncrossable until Europeans crossed it, you erase the greatest navigators who ever lived. You erase the networks they built. You erase the knowledge systems sophisticated enough to cross the largest ocean on the planet repeatedly, carrying living plants, without instruments, without maps, without anything except accumulated human intelligence, passed from navigator to navigator across generations. That knowledge system existed, it worked, and it has been written out of the version of history taught in schools whose curricula were built on a different foundation. There is a generation of researchers right now with access to genetic sequencing technology that would have seemed like science fiction 20 years ago, who are asking these questions despite the incentive structure, not because of it. The 2020 Nature study was one result. There will be more. And every time one publishes, the gap between what the science says and what the textbooks say becomes harder to hold. The mainstream will move eventually. Institutions always do. They move slowly, reluctantly, and they rarely credit the outsiders who forced the question. And when they finally acknowledge that people were crossing the Pacific long before Columbus, they will present it as a new discovery. They will not mention the researchers who spent careers being ignored for asking the right questions too early. But now you have the full picture. And knowing how the system works is the first step to not letting it work on you. The people who crossed that ocean were not myths. They were navigators, engineers of knowledge. They solved a problem that took European civilization thousands of additional years to approach. They connected two worlds that did not know the other existed. They carried life across the largest empty space on the surface of the planet, repeatedly, quietly, brilliantly. And the civilization that came after them looked at the evidence and chose not to see it. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part of this changed how you see it. Tell me what you want to see next. There is so much more buried in the pre-Columbian Pacific than one video can hold. The stone structures, the astronomical alignments, the full genetic map that is still being assembled. We are just getting started.